Ladies and gentlemen, I think the most relevant theme in today's world is, of course, climate change. How it impacts us is no longer something that you watch as a documentary on National Geographic. It affects our lives, it affects our schedule, it affects what flight we can take, how our houses drown. So we definitely have a champion here to address this really important theme. She, of course, has many firsts to her credit, starting out as a journalist and, of course, being recognized for her work relating to human rights and peace internationally. She's been recognized by the International Republican Institute as a democracy hero. She has often been cited in the global list of the most influential ladies and Asians around the world. She's become the first Pakistani to be recognized with an award for independent journalism by the UK House of Lords as they presented to the Muslim World Awards back in 2002. She has, of course, served on some very important positions, first as a Federal Minister for Information and Broadcasting, also has been a prolific and a very strong diplomat and advocate of Pakistan, serving as the former ambassador of Pakistan to US. She has been a senator since 2015 and the first woman leader of the opposition at the Senate. Right now, she has the very important and strenuous portfolio as the Federal Minister for Ministry of Climate Change. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Senator Sherry Rehman.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Asfar Ehsan of Nutshell Conferences or Nutshell Conferences of Asfar Ehsan. Let's decide what that is. Thank you very much for taking out the time and giving us, myself and my other colleague, this opportunity. I've been asked to speak in English by Asfar for his global audience, so I will try to stick to that. But very quickly, let me say, first of all, that finding climate literacy in Pakistan is no longer a challenge. That's the first thing. As you know, our wonderful moderator and presenter, Sidra Iqbal, told us that it impacts our lives. Unfortunately, we shouldn't have waited this long. We shouldn't have waited until the disasters came to us one after another in a cascade of horrifying incidents that are shaking the country to the core as we speak. While we are talking, we still have terrible floods in Balochistan. Sindh is being ravaged. And I mention these two provinces particularly because in our daily tabulations, while I'm not the Met Office nor meant to be, in our daily tabulations we see the percentage of torrential downpours this year exceeding almost all grounds. Now, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has also been facing a fair amount of monsoon damage, but really the brunt of it is being faced, as we all know, by Balochistan and then Sindh, especially Karachi, which has seen unprecedented rain. Cities like Karachi don't take more than a few millimeters, nor are they designed for it. This year they've been seeing more than 200. Anyway, Balochistan has seen more than 620% of, 605, I beg your pardon, percent of rain this year on a 30-year average. That's how the Met Office calculates its averages, but I believe it's one of the highest ever. 600% than normal is actually quite devastating. Sindh was predicted and is facing it. The predictions come late because that is the way of the weather, as you know. 525%, 525% and 605% over any averages should sober us up and make us think about what it is we need to do. Obviously, our disaster preparedness was informed in time, NDMAs, PDMAs. I'm sorry to take a little time on the weather as opposed to the climate, but I think that's important to address right now because it's a manifestation. These are outcomes of the slow onset of climate change, which brings me to the next point. It is no longer a slow onset, ladies and gentlemen. the climate change as predicted by models, by scientists all over the world, and these are calculated at the annual and presented at the annual Conference of Parties by the United Nations and its entire huge infrastructure of a calculus on climate science. I'm sorry, but the models are failing. We are far behind, not just in catching up. In fact, our disaster preparedness, I was just telling my colleague, Mr. Simon, at the podium, is better than most countries, given the amount of resources we face. But the climate catastrophe that we are facing is clearly very global, and it is impacting our lives in ways that we did not think would impact us in this decade or 2022. What is happening to the world today, and of course Pakistan, was supposed to happen much later if global leaders did not act, if countries did not reduce their emissions, if they did not take all the actions that the Conference of Parties tells us every year. Well, the commitments made at the COP26 and 25, the pivotal one was in Paris many years ago, and those were for reducing emissions every year and by certain benchmarks. Pakistan has made nationally our national contributions, our NDCs, but so does every country. Every country is behind, except some parts of Western Europe, in reducing emissions. But having said that, they are also behind. All my colleagues and ministers in the world, I've said this at the last international conference I had at Berlin, everybody's behind. The pace of climate change and its impacts are far more accelerated than the benchmark of 2050, which was set by the Conference of Parties, by global leaders, because climate change is global. Even, and I told our cabinet meeting this yesterday, even if we take all the actions and tick mark them on our box for action, all the ambition is met by action, which it is not globally, then we will still be facing what we face today. So the threshold for many countries is already here. We are, Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, is in the front lines. We are the ground zero of climate change, as is South Asia. I do not know about Africa, but I do share some experiences with them. But all countries, they seem to be facing constant calamity, many countries there. But it is the location near the equator. It is our geography, our longitude, our latitude, and the fact that Pakistan from north to south has a very a particular kind of geography and topography and soil and manifestation of physical, well, beauty. It's beautiful, but right now the point is, for instance, Pakistan has the largest amount of glaciers outside the polar region. Most people don't know it. They come here for trekking, and they need to not litter our north. But it is it's home to the largest amount of, by far, glaciers, not the Alps, outside the polar region. And these are melting. Pakistan relies on mostly the Indus River to carry its water down all the way to the south and into the sea. And we rely on glacial melt mostly for our irrigation system, which is still one of the largest man-made irrigation systems in the world. I think it's second now, but was ranked particularly high, and which waters the plains of the Punjab and some of Sindh now, which are our bread baskets. And here's what we face. I'm putting my speech away because I think I'm using this opportunity to shock not necessarily awe, but the point here is, I think we need to educate each other about the magnitude and scale and ferocity of the accelerated climate crisis the world faces today, at which, I repeat, we are in the front lines. Why I say we are in the front lines is just look at this year. Look at 2022. You need not go further. You can look at 2010 perhaps or 2015 as anomalies. You can look at them as anomalies. Wo chale aisa saal tha, but 1/5 of Pakistan was underwater in that great flood, the one I'm speaking about earlier. 1/5. We have made a slow and sustained recovery from it. But now it's not going to be anomalies. Maybe you have a pattern where you have a trajectory where next year is better, agla saal shayad theek ho sakta hai. Mera view hai ki aisa nahi hoga. That will not happen. Given the pace of climate change, we asked the cabinet yesterday to please allow us to shift all our planning priorities and rejig them to 2030. They were all set to 2050 as per global standards. That is what the COP20s, all of them have plotted their final net zero and other commitments. We have all these ambitions, promises are not matched. The global ones are not matched by, the pledges are not matched by processes, and the ambitions are not matched by actions. Well, everybody is struggling. The rich countries right now are obsessed with supply chain breakdowns, obviously, and after the Ukraine war, and global warming is something that is actually not on our front pages, but for instance, France just had a huge, long forest fire in the region of Bordeaux. Kentucky in the United States is facing a similar catastrophe. Canada had to displace thousands of people, evacuate thousands of people for its flooding recently. So did Australia. Most of Western Europe a few weeks ago was burning up at 40 degrees. I think we did better than that in our forest fires. I think we did better than that, but we didn't have to evacuate 37,000 people for a forest fire that went on and on. Spain, Portugal, all of them are fighting because they're in a season behind us. We didn't have a spring this year. Pakistan did not have a spring. We transitioned straight from winter into scorching summer, and hence the forest fires. We actually have a fire season in the Margalas, in KP, where the big forests, and Gilgit-Baltistan. The season went completely haywire. We lost 3 forest fighters in Balochistan. That was the longest fire, and Balochistan has the least capacity to fight that fire. That lasted 11 days. We had to ask, the problem is we are the federal government until they ask us, but we got on a task force on Zoom with them, and we said, all right, tell us, what do you need? They did not articulate a need to us. I said, tell us what you need. You're into 11 kilometers of a forest fire. So we've been fighting fires for the last 4 months, and I don't mean just Miftah smile. and in that, they said, well, you know, it's our Chilgoza forests are burning up. Okay, so we sent NDMA, which means federal resources. Their helicopters, planes responded immediately within the same day and said, this is beyond everyone. We need to, so we said, all right, we contact the Foreign Office, PM's office, sir, we need to really respond to this somehow. Then we got a Bowser plane, a water Bowser plane from Iran, who obviously are equipped for this. They have a similar topography to Balochistan. And by the time the plane came, between that and the weather itself, the fire was put out. That was the most extreme fire we've had. Most of Western Europe has had worse. Parts of the United States, California with its droughting and desertification, Western California, Central California mostly. Many countries, I mean, Cape Town was rationing water. People need to know this. They need to prepare for the challenge and to take it seriously. It is not some foreseeable future that we are giving away when we run many air conditioners at one time, when we let the water taps run dry, carry on, when we wash our cars and just expand our carbon footprint that our entire generations have been doing without thinking. Nothing should be without thinking now when you use the world, the planet's or nature's resources. And this is human activity which has caused it. It is the age of the Anthropocene, which means this is the first century which human beings have dominated. And from the pre-industrial revolution to now, we have destroyed most of our resources. Our exploitation has been injudicious, even rapacious of this planet. And now Pakistan is facing what, say, a developed country or a slew of developed countries have done in their backyard. The global West, what we call the North in our climate language, in the Conference of Parties multilateral forums, has gotten rich on the back of very high exploitation of natural resources and, of course, the burning of fossil fuels, which is why the greenhouse gases have gone through the roof, and why we are facing the forest fires, the heat waves, the flooding, the desertification, sometimes even at the same time, and the melting of our glaciers. And we have had 3 times as many glacial lake outburst events, they're called GLOF events, flood events, than we have normally every year. So 3 times as many GLOF events. We have saved human lives because we have monitoring systems in GB, which is bizarrely run by my ministry. That's an anomalous project, but we do it well. So we've been able to save lives, but obviously not infrastructure. When the water rushes in a terrible cascade, nothing stands in its way. But we've had the communities move out in time because you can see that it's coming. So you know, severe consequences, immediate, medium term, and long term. And we've been planning for that yesterday. I had to get the attention of the cabinet. I said, this will keep on recurring. This level of flooding preceded by drought in Balochistan and Sindh. Again, both are flooded. The north will face different consequences. They dealt with fires and GLOF events, and so nobody really was exempt, no area. Probably Islamabad has been relatively free of huge disasters. We did have the forest fires, but we've been dealing with them at the Margala level, which we run. Now, here's where we stand. What do we do? Do we manage the same targets? Do we carry on at 2050 with mitigation goals? Now, in easy words, layman's words, mitigation is literally 2 actions that reduce greenhouse gases, mostly planting trees, and those are the low-cost nature-based solutions. And the other is, of course, completely reducing all reliance on fossil fuels. Most countries have an energy baseload. I wish the power minister was here, that even Germany is resorting back to coal right now because the carbon footprint of a war is high. Now, had this war been raging in South Asia, let me tell you, the carbon footprint would have been calculated. We would be hectored every day for being irresponsible leaders, not sorting our problems via diplomacy. That's happening in the heart of Europe, ladies and gentlemen. And it is completely messing up supply chains, food security, water, everything, absolutely everything, you know. But there it is. And it is making countries that had committed, had reduced their carbon footprint back to, shall we go back to coal? They need a base load. Renewables are not always able to provide the heavy, at this point at least, the heavy base load needed that is constant and reliable. We need batteries, wind and solar, as you know. The only good news for this in Pakistan is that we have the resources to eventually move to renewables and we are resetting our targets to renewables, we are setting them for our own good. We've already committed very high ambitious NDCs for mitigation targets last year for 50% reduction in our fossil fuel usage, and then grading down of using coal and other non-renewables by 2030, and then other targets by 2050. But the point is, that's fine. Other countries are not necessarily matching their goals. There's nobody to monitor it. Let's be very real. If tomorrow XYZ country, and we are sitting right next to a very big polluter, which is India, it's the third biggest polluter in the world in greenhouse gases, emitter rather, and nobody will do anything about it if you miss your targets. These are all based on, well, you know, I've made a commitment. I was feeling okay that day at the summit, and Pakistan, all ministries decided, yes, we'll do it. They sent us there, we made the commitment, and we're trying to keep that commitment. But nothing can happen if you don't, right? It really should. Something should happen if you don't, because we are still, we are managing our disasters far better than other countries. Why? Because we know how to, I guess, with less resources. Now, coming back to the way forward, without too much, discussion on loss and damage, which Pakistan faces a great deal of, and climate change, for instance, impacts 9.1% of our GDP. That's a huge number. It's higher than most African states. And this is from a report that the United Nations SCAP has done on South Asia. The costs are extremely high. They're crippling, and we need to consider this as an all-aspect, cross-cutting, multidimensional, and complex problem. It is, to me, a national security problem. It impacts your infrastructure, your energy, your ability to deliver normal supply chains. It involves our entire rescue relief operations. Half the year now, 41 days of the year will be heat waved now, will be part of a heat wave. And for 3 years, we have been the hottest place on the planet for 3 successive years. We will be water scarce in 2025. Do people know this? Why isn't it being bandwidthed and discussed in cabinet? I brought it to cabinet yesterday. I said, this has to immediately, committees are formed. It impacts our food security exponentially, and it impacts water. Water is life, absolutely. And so, we will not be, we are already water stressed, we will be water scarce. And for 3 years, Jacobabad, Dadu, and one other city was in Balochistan, Sindh and Balochistan, were the hottest places in the planet, going over 50 degrees. Europe is burning up at just 40. But that is not a livable temperature. 50 degrees plus is certainly not habitable for this planet. The crops are all burnt. If you just go down, you'll see that. And it is a serious national security existential crisis. No, I will not speak in 2 minutes. I will not. If you've got my time here, you will let me speak for as long as I need to, which is 5 more minutes. And what I'm telling this community here is that most of you are business leaders. You need to know the scale and size of this, and ferocity and accelerated timeline of this. And you need to plan for it in your businesses, because you deliver goods and services. And the delivery of your goods and services, whether they're online, whether they're physical, and the physical world cannot go away, despite our celebration and underuse of the digital world. Pakistan underuses its digital economy. Of course, it should be using it much more. But that's a separate conversation which people will be having here, I'm sure. That needs to be planned for. Do not bring me, a lot of you have brought me CSR pilot projects to greenwash your carbon offsets. My doors are closed for that. Do not, that's what the rest of the world is doing. Stop doing that. Give us something you can do that scales up the industry or even your company. And I will circulate through Nutshell and other forums and through our industries ministry and others what we can do to reset priorities for businesses. Pakistan, just to assure you, has reset priorities yesterday in the cabinet. We will not compromise on our long-term mitigation goals and our promises made. Those are promises to ourselves. But we have shifted focus to adaptation. Adaptation, in simple language, outside of climate science, means the country has to level up its resources and thinking and planning to face down climate disasters. Now that means provinces have to pretty much level up. Our job is to give them policies. Nobody is giving them that. We have been started now. We started with hazardous waste, and I will be moving from here to the agriculture task force, and then we will be working on both water and agriculture. So those will be our priorities. We cannot have water wiped out. We cannot have our food wiped out. We're already importing loads of it. And the renewables mitigation targets, we'll be moving on those in any case because we need to reduce our import bills, and we have the natural resources. But right now the base load will be coal. That is the case, and that's how it is. I do not wish to be lying to you. So what can businesses do? Businesses need to assess the burden of impact, reset priorities, and suggest to us, have a conference, as for you can do that. We will facilitate what you need. Suggest to us what you need from the government to help you plan and adapt to the new climate catastrophe, because it's a catastrophe. It's not going to change. Obviously, innovation and new tech will play a huge part in this. The digital economy will. It can provide pathways for even calculating your carbon offset. We are signing on all the textile companies onto Pakistan Net Zero, which really just means that they start reducing and capping their emissions, which many can do. So many of the big companies, especially the Karachi-based ones, are signing on, and we are giving them the caps to do that. All of you can be responsible, and more sustainable. You can build in green tech and green goals. We can sit with you to do that. We can have a separate session for that, but Asfar wanted me to set a kind of bigger, broad-based goal, and I had to share with you what's actually happening in the country, because I don't think anyone had figured this out, nor had this ministry even wrapped its head around the level of crisis. I'm going to end with just saying, I'll give you an example. Look at IKEA. We all know that Swedish company. A lot of Swedish companies are into high innovation, and that's what this leadership conference is about. And they are looking at, they're procuring their wood, 50% of their wood from sustainable forests, and 100% of their cotton from farms that are compliant with the better cotton regulations. Now you can start looking at that. Your human resource can also start, your procurements can start looking at that, and you can begin innovations in your own company. There's packages in Lahore. They are doing a vast amount of recycling, but not enough. So there are companies that are they're enhancing their climate literacy. They are looking for better technology, and they're seeking to decarbonize their own production cycles, their manufacturing cycles, and even if they're agri-tech companies. Now, agri-tech can assist us and each other a great deal. Agriculture is one of the biggest emitters of global gases, almost 80%, I must say, 80 to 85 in Pakistan. Shocking figure. So I really need to get to that agriculture conference. They're using all the water almost, and they are one of, without even knowing, a big emitter all over the world. So we've all got to eat, right? The human race needs to eat. So we have to figure out what to do on our own time, in our own space, because the rest of the world is just not coming to anyone's rescue. Everybody is looking for nature to set back its default. It's not happening, ladies and gentlemen. We all have to do what we can. And if any of you need access, opportunity to engage, or any knowledge that you want to share, innovations that you want to bring to the table, our doors are open. If Asfar can't get you to me, then very few people can. Thank you very much for your time. I'm so sorry I exceeded my limit. Thank you.
As this year's, the 5th edition of Leaders in Islamabad coincides with the Diamond Jubilee of Pakistan, what we are giving away is this beautiful book called Pakistan Beauty and Splendor by Irfan Mirza. He is a prolific writer and photographer. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request our first speaker, Mr. Ralph Simon, the founder and chief executive of Mobilium Global, to please come up and accept this as a token of our gratitude. The Honourable Minister for Climate Change, Senator Sherry Rehman, presenting this as a token of our appreciation to Mr. Ralph Simon, founder and chief executive of Mobilium, at the 5th edition of the Leaders in Islamabad. Ralph, may I request you to please stay up on stage for the group photographs. Please stay with us. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome our next speaker, the founding president of BSV Blockchain Association, Mr. Jimmy Nguyen. Ladies and gentlemen, next up, may I also request the Chief Executive Officer of NBP Fund Management Limited, Mr. Dr. Amjad Waheed, to please come up on stage and receive this book as a token of our appreciation, sir. Thank you, sir. May I request you to please stay up on stage with us. Ladies and gentlemen, now requesting Mr. Ali Akhai and Mr. Muhammad Asfar Ehsan to present a book to the Honorable Senator Sherry Rehman Saiba as a token of our gratitude and appreciation for her being here and for gracing this occasion. May I request all the gentlemen on the head table to please join us up on stage for a group photograph, please.